You guys both for letting us stop by today. And one of the big reasons we're by here is, again, to follow up on our state of the state. Historically high employment, historically low unemployment. Because of that, we have a stronger than expected budget surplus for this current fiscal year, and that's really driving the fact that combined with doing a good job of controlling our expenditures has freed up a larger than expected surplus. What I've said in the past is when the state has a larger than expected surplus, we're going to send it back to the hardworking taxpayers. And so part of the reason I'm here, part of the reason I was in town down the way last week is to draw attention to our proposal, which is the easiest, fastest, most effective way to send this larger than expected surplus back to the hardworking taxpayers is through a child tax credit. This year it would be a sales tax rebate because that's the quickest way to get it right back into people's hands. In the future, it would be part of the income tax, and in total, it would be part of the more than $8 billion through the end of this budget, the cumulative impact of our tax relief. We've got income taxes, we've got property taxes, we've got all different types of taxes, and farmers and manufacturers, and you name it. But this is one more way we can send money right back to the hardworking taxpayers, in this case to help working families. I've heard in the last week from a lot of parents and a lot of grandparents who've talked about how excited they are about this credit. As we laid out last week, it would, when approved, I shouldn't say if, when approved, be optimistic about this because the response from lawmakers in both the Senate and Assembly has been extraordinary. When approved, we would have a website up and operational that's starting May 15th. So a month after income taxes are due, it would give us enough time, Department of Revenue, to be queued up and ready. They'd have the most up-to-date information to make sure this was validating the accuracy of these child tax credits. But on May 15th, we'd start having parents be able to go online. We'd have assistance at libraries, at schools, at other places around the state. They'd have through June 30th. And then by law, the requirement would be either directly deposited into their accounts or sent to their homes in a check. They'd be eligible to receive $100 for every child living at home for any residents here in the state of Wisconsin. Why we're here today, besides the fact it's just cool to be at a store that's been around since 1874, which is pretty awesome. And you guys are almost at a century just in the same family.
Correct.
Multiple generations, obviously, but the same family, is to say that our goal is with this, so say for a family with 2 or 3 kids, an extra $200 to $300 means that as the kids fill up their backpacks, which hopefully we do as well, you can put a whole lot of school supplies, a whole lot of books into it. Our goal would be at a time when many times families have a hard time making ends meet right before the start of school, when they need to get supplies, when the kids need new shoes and jackets and clothing, things of that nature. This would be another benefit for our families in this state. And again, something we've heard great praise from just in the last week or so from parents and even grandparents who are excited knowing the challenges there. The other thing I like about it is our hope would be, and we're going to continue to do events like this across the state all the way through the start of school, is to encourage people to go to stores right in their own local communities to help further extend this reform dividend, making it your reform dividend, individual dividends that people get from the reforms we've done over the last few years, the benefit of that. And the way to pay it forward is not only to use it for families, but to come to stores like this, to buy supplies right here in your community, to support people who live and work and pay taxes and support schools and nonprofits and all sorts of other good things. And then in doing that, we believe that that'll add even more positive impact into the economy. That'll help us create going into the next year an even greater surplus than expected. And then we can continue to invest that in our priorities, things like schools, and continue to reduce property and income taxes here in the state. So part of the reason why I'm here today, and we'll be making multiple trips, not only in the coming days, but in the coming months, to local stores that make a difference in our community, whether it's here in Wausau or elsewhere across the state. We think it's another way that we can help have the multiplier effect, where it not only helps families, it not only reduces the tax burden, it'll help our local stores, infuse our local economies, and in turn help us build even bigger surpluses in the future, which we can reinvest right back into our taxpayers and right back into our schools. With that, we'll take questions if you got them.
So just exactly how did you come up with $100 for the dividend? I guess in the second part of my question is, what do you say to those who say, well, maybe this money could be a smaller dividend to everybody, not just people with kids, because obviously not everybody has kids.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple different things we looked at. What would have the biggest impact on the economy and how can we get it out there quickly? If we did an across-the-board income tax cut for everyone, an average household would see just over $50 versus households with kids that might see $200 to $300. Well, I always like to cut taxes, and so I've cut income taxes in the past and will again in the future. We thought in terms of having a dynamic impact right away on the economy, having families, which we know come right before September 1st, are going to be out thinking about school supplies, having $200 to $300 or more in their hands to go out and spend. We think we'll have a positive boost on the economy. We also think it'll make it easier for us to do income and property taxes again in the future, because going into next year's budget, at the start of the year, if we have an even bigger surplus than expected because all these people ran out the stores like this one across the state and invested, we think that'll increase sales taxes again, just like it did this year. In terms of the $100, we looked at the $122 million or so that we thought we had room to spend with the added amount and the amount that we automatically by law set aside in the rainy day fund. And we just looked at this saying this was a good way to have a reasonable cover in the balance. And whether it was $100 or $110, we thought $100 is just one of those things that pops, it gets people's attention, and has a positive impact. In terms of others, I'd say to, which includes me and my family, my kids are over 18, I don't get a benefit from this, but over the last few years, we've cut income taxes for everyone, we've cut property taxes across the board. In total, the cumulative impact of our tax reform through the end of this budget exceeds $8 billion. So we've cut taxes for seniors, we've cut taxes for people living on fixed incomes, we've cut taxes on income, but we've also cut taxes in specific areas. We dramatically reduced the tax burden on farmers and on manufacturers. We've done more than 50 different individual or targeted tax relief issues on top of the income and property taxes. And so we've made decisions to target before as well as do across the board. In this instance, this has the biggest bang for the buck, and it can be done the most quickly because for this year it'll be a sales tax rebate, which is why we can send it as a check or direct deposit right away. So the good news is for somebody who doesn't have kids eligible now, the way we're setting this up makes it all the more likely that come next year there's going to be money to spend on reducing people's taxes all over again.
Governor, is the GOP enthusiasm for this kind of cooling down? I think it was last week, Senator Fitzgerald said he wanted to see it sit in the sun for a few days, I think is how he put it. And then I know a Milwaukee WISN talk show host had some critical thoughts on it. Just your thoughts on, I guess, the likelihood of this making its way through.
I think there's broad-based enthusiasm for this. I've talked to, last week alone, last Friday, there were 11 different lawmakers, including several senators that joined me with stops around the state. I was just at Lincoln Day dinners throughout the weekend. People cheered and hollered and supported this as well. You're right, I've heard from one person on the radio in Milwaukee, but none of the others, whether it's here in Green Bay, Madison, or Milwaukee, have raised concerns. And out of the senators, I talked to Senator Fitzgerald on Sunday at the Lincoln Day dinner. He's ready to go on this. The other day I had Senator Tom Tiffany with me and Senator Jerry Petrowski with me. I've had other senators with me across the state. And even down in the Milwaukee area, Senator Dewey Strobel, one of the most conservative members of the Wisconsin State Senate, put out a release last week saying he thinks it's a super idea. So we think this will pass. And I believe in the end it will not only pass with across-the-board Republican support, I believe in the end, because this will be a separate piece of legislation, I think you'll see a fair number of Democrats voting for this, because who wants to be against this? This is something that puts more money back in the hands of hardworking taxpayers, and it's something that will have a positive impact on families.
A recent media report came out about UW schools and sexual harassment. As the governor of Wisconsin, what's your reaction to that report?
Well, we take it very seriously. Since I've been governor, we've been very aggressive since January of 2011 in terms of pushing back, making sure that all of our state employees are safe and protected against sexual harassment or worse. We've been so aggressive that a few years ago, when I signed a change in the civil service reforms, we actually made it an offense that can be directly fired for. Oddly enough, under the old civil service system before, someone couldn't be fired solely for that. We can now fire people directly for that. That's a reform we put in place a few years ago. And our expectation would be, since we're one of the primary funders of the University of Wisconsin system, we would expect the same thing from our system leadership, our regents pushing for those changes, and from individual campuses with chancellors and directors all across the state. We take it absolutely seriously. Whether it's faculty, staff, students, everyone should be safe on campus.
And Governor, in regard to the two vacant seats, I think De Pere and Lodi, there have been some articles recently I've read that say that they claim you're not following state statute. I guess that you're supposed to be more prompt about having a special election instead of waiting till November. Sort of a twofold question, I guess. Are you following state statutes in your decision to wait until November? And I guess critics who say you're, allowing underrepresentation in those areas, I guess what is your response to that?
Well, if people look at the state law, as opposed to, not saying you are, but if those liberal bloggers that are out talking about it actually look at the state law, it's very clear. By law, if I called a special session today, or special election today, the election could not be held until after the April the April general election. So the first Tuesday in April, there's elections for the state Supreme Court, for local, county, and municipal offices. By law, because of the time frame we're in, we're prohibited. If I were to call one today, I can't call one between now until after the beginning of April. We get past April 3rd, April 15th is the first day that people can take out nomination signatures for the fall elections. The legislature will long have been adjourned. People will be taking out papers for the fall elections. To me, it doesn't make any sense to the hardworking taxpayers of this state that we'd be calling a special election after the legislature was already done and won't be back until January, and not even weeks, days away from the time that people will take out nomination papers. All it would be doing is having a special election for something that can't take a vote on until after the fall election. So we looked at the law. It's very clear we can't hold elections right now, and so we thought if it's after the April general election, it doesn't make any sense when people are already taking out papers for the fall election to hold an election, just to have it concurrent with the fall and save the taxpayers some money.
Okay. Any concerns about, does any of it have to do with, you kind of explained your reason there, but some critics, I guess, and like you mentioned before, it's an election year, your critics are going to say a lot of stuff, but does any of it have to do with, just the recent results of that Senate District 10 election?
No, and again, this is one of those where I always encourage people in the media and in general to look at the facts, not at what people are saying, and who have a vested interest in attacking us. And that is, if you look at the facts, we said what we're going to do with these two seats before the special election in the 10th Senate District. So they're claiming it's because of that, but we made the announcement before that. So we had no idea, knowing what the special election for the Senate was going to be, when we said for us to hold an election. If I did what some liberal outlets want us to do, which is to hold a special election right now, if I called it today, it couldn't be till after the beginning of April, for which we'd be days away from the special election and probably a good month after the legislature adjourned. That's why we did it. It was simple. We thought it doesn't make any sense to use the taxpayers' money on something to put somebody in after they no longer would be able to vote, and for which they'd already be running again for the fall election.
As far as Sarah's law in regards to one of the victims of the March 22nd shooting that Representative Snyder's promoting for down in Madison, is that something you would be interested in signing?
Say that again.
The law that they're wanting to introduce about protecting family attorneys.
Oh, okay.
Is that something you would be?
Sure, I'd look at it. I haven't seen specifically what they're introducing, but certainly, I came up here right after all that awful tragedy happened and talked to the families. I just mentioned this the other day when I was up on Saturday talking about in March being about a year out since we lost a number of people, but particularly one of our finest, a great detective here at the D.C. Everest Police Department, and certainly having great empathy for that. If there are other ways we can provide added deterrence, absolutely. I haven't looked at the specific bill that you're talking about, but that's something we'd obviously be interested in.
Core part of that is it makes it a felony to threaten a family.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like protecting
totally
family
would make
attorneys.
sense.
Ironically, Sarah Court-Sand worked here at Yankee Bookstore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's a good example where it's one of those where it's had a larger ripple effect.
Yes.
So it's one of those, anything we can do that provides a deterrent. It does go to something we were actually talking about downstairs though before, is that in addition to deterrence, there's a larger issue. It goes beyond just something as awful as this, but with mental health, with people dealing with addiction, with all sorts of other issues that we're trying to aggressively treat, even with new monies we put into the schools to try and get at issues as quickly as we can to get students, and oftentimes the parents and families with them, the kind of mental health services they need to live more stable lives and obviously prosperous lives here.